I'm Alex of All Trades, and this is the Sunday Book Circle for Inland by Tea Obreht. Inland is a two-pronged narrative that takes place within a single day for the homesteading wife and mother Nora Lark, and over several years for a Baltic immigrant, Lurie, traveling across the U.S. Nora only has her youngest half-blind son, Toby, her husband's young cousin, Josie, who claims to be able to speak to ghosts, and her elderly mother-in-law. Lurie tells his story to Burke, whose identity is not clear at first, and explains how he was an orphan, a thief, a highwayman, and a camel man. The language of the tiger's wife was what had drawn me in when I picked up Obrecht's debut novel, which was a major hit with deserved positive critical response. The tiger's wife has some scenes burned into my memory with how beautifully they were described. I read that one for fun years before I started this channel, so I never gave it much detailed critical examination. I remember how much I loved it, which is why I was so excited at the announcement of her second novel. It's also why I nominated Inland for one of my book clubs. The reading world had to wait quite a while for Obrecht's second novel, but the wait was well worth it. When she came to changing hands on the book tour for Inland, I got my copies signed. While waiting for my drink order before the reading, I talked to another patron who wondered why there was such a long wait between the two. I hadn't started Inland yet, having just received my copy, but since I was a writer, I answered that The Tiger's Wife had a lot of research behind it, and I figured Inland did too. Obrecht stated at the reading that she did, in fact, have to do a lot of research to be able to write Inland. While not from the American Southwest, Obrecht said she fell in love with the area. She has spent a lot of her life in desert climes, so she has a proclivity for them. Her love of the Mojave and Sonoran deserts is clear in the language she uses to describe the area in which I grew up. Her language is heavily poetic, at times verging into the obtuse, but with verb choices that are, at times, startling. These verbs always make sense, but they are so specific and strange that a reader sometimes has to go over the sentence again to be sure they got the meaning behind its use. I found myself doing this often and then smiling at the interesting ways in which Obrecht described a scene or action. It was impressive, and to some could be seen as literary flexing. I found it delightful. Nora's husband, Emmett, has been missing from retrieving water for their homestead. He also owns a printing press that he uses to print a paper for the surrounding residents of Amerigo, run with their two older sons, Dolan and Rob. Long before he left to get water, the county seat, which up to this point has been in Amerigo, was under debate with the question of whether it should remain in Amerigo or be moved to Ash River, a larger town with a land and cattle tycoon, Crace. Since the debate started, Emmett's paper, much to Nora's displeasure, has been publishing opinion after opinion that the county seat should be moved to Ash River. Nora pressed Emmett on why there were never any letters stating that the people didn't want it moved, to which he always replied, there were none. She asked him to write one, and he did, supposedly. After he dragged his feet for too long, Nora struggled to write one. But once she completed it, Emmett told her he never had any intention of publishing her letter, but wanted her to do it as an exercise. Putting aside how disrespectful of his wife this is, it's pretty clear early on in this that Emmett is not unbiased in his printing of opinions. When we learn this for a fact, it's unsurprising. I got a strange sense of déjà vu with the subject of the press throughout Inland. I've written on how I am anti-news. I do not read it, or at least try not to, and that surprises people because they think you can't be informed and have well-formed opinions without the news. But as Denzel Washington so aptly said, if you don't read the news, you're uninformed. But if you do read the news, then you're misinformed. I spent so many years learning and practicing rhetorical analysis, and that's why I stopped reading the news. The intense manipulation was too much for me. The miscasting of events or statements was frustrating beyond belief, and this was years and years before the phrase fake news was ever popular. The freedom of the press, the fourth estate, from the government is important in and of itself, but the freedom of the press from special private interests is just as important. We obviously don't want the government to control the narrative completely, Nor do we want giant conglomerates to either. Inland depicted my issues with the news at a microcosmic level. Not only the bending to special interests created either from monetary corruption or intimidation, but also the silencing of rural and small town communities. It was eerie to see this all play out in a Western novel. I'm not sure if this was an overt choice made by Obreht, or a subconscious inclusion, or maybe even just an accident of circumstance, but I believe it perfectly captures the issues of the press today. Maybe the issues of today's press are the same issues the press has always had. That wouldn't surprise me either. Thirst is a constant state in this novel. Nora's storyline, while taking place over a 24-hour period, has her going without water the whole time, giving it to others or using it for other tasks. She's so thirsty, and it is obviously affecting her mood. While Nora is very intelligent, though she can be willfully ignorant, she can use that intelligence as a weapon, and sometimes her thirst gets the better of her and she takes it out on those around her. Lurie's thirst and want come from the ghosts haunting him. After he sees Donovan's ghost, who died thirsty, Lurie is perpetually, unnaturally thirsty. He will not allow his canteen to run dry, so all the waterways he comes across are mixed together in it, creating a sample of his journey with Burke. Donovan and Lurie mostly got into trouble because Lurie was haunted by Hob, Donovan's younger brother, who was a kleptomaniac and drove Lurie to steal. This need of Hobbs becomes less pronounced throughout the book, especially after Lurie runs into Donovan's ghost, his thirst essentially replacing it. Nora's thirst throughout the day is real, grounded in the kind of thirst a person would naturally have, and her anger over the knocking over of the water barrel in the spring house is justified by her dangerous lack of water for herself. Lurie's thirst, in contrast, is based on supernatural need. He often comes to sources of water in his journey, and his compunction to keep his canteen from ever becoming empty stems entirely from Donovan. Nora's thirst is physical, Lurie's thirst, it can be argued, is mental. The ghosts, while real from Lurie's perspective, could be literary metaphors for the mental health issues that drive some criminals. On a more literal level, however, there is evidence that the ghosts, counter to what Nora believes, are real. But to get more into this, I've got to talk spoilers, so skip ahead to get my final thoughts. Nora's physical thirst is solved by Lurie's mental thirst. This is a beautiful ending, and essentially puts a stop to the idea that the ghosts aren't real for a couple of reasons. First, it turns out Lurie is dead and has been the whole novel. He's been telling his story to Burke the camel, who has been wandering while carrying poor Lurie's body, with Lurie's ghost following. Secondly, the ghost that Josie mentions several times has been Lurie the whole novel, which is completely counter to the seance Nora had with Josie for her daughter Evelyn, wherein it was clear that Josie wasn't talking to Evelyn at all. So Josie is both a fraud and a true medium. In all likelihood, she wanted to please Nora and make her feel better, since Nora was so often mean to Josie. Perhaps Josie felt some comfort over Evelyn could make Nora a little nicer. The best aspect about Lurie being dead is that Inland is a ghost story as told from the perspective of a ghost. This is a brilliant way of turning everything upside down on the reader. We expect ghost stories to be only about the haunted, not those haunting them. After I finished Inland, I had the good luck to be part of a virtual author Q&A with Tea Obreht about Inland, hosted by the Tucson Festival of Books. In that session, the idea of animals as being representatives of the natural world was brought up, especially in contrast to the idea of humans as being between the natural and supernatural. We're not quite on the same level as animals in most people's minds. According to most religious observations, we are either capable of being divine or a facsimile of the divine. Obrecht's two novels both cover ghosts, myths, and fairy tales, and the human attempt to understand them. Josie can speak to the dead sometimes. Lurie can see ghosts and can be haunted by them. The beast that stalks the land surrounding Nora's home is frightening to some of the characters, even if Nora herself does not believe it is real, despite some evidence to the contrary, and Nora herself speaks to her deceased daughter Evelyn, who, as a ghost, ages. Though Nora claims it is just her imagination. Human beings are forever going to try to understand what happens after death and what happens in the dark or unseen places. We are a naturally curious species, and the search for answers to the unknown is universal. Even if not every individual will search for those answers, every culture has, and will continue to do so. Myth and then religion and then science are all human attempts to explain the world around us and understand its inherent rules, but they so often overlap. So the use of all three and their competition for our attention is so wonderfully done in Inland. As I've stated before, I already read The Tiger's Wife, which, if you've not read it, has a lot of stuff about myths and legends. Obreht takes these things and creates an answer for what they truly were, while still leaving room for the supernatural. Inland is about the red beast legend, which turns out to be Burke the camel. A reader may not know of the legend or myth that Obreht is playing with before reading, but a reader doesn't have to. Obreht will make it plenty mysterious without making someone do research. She's already done all that research and makes it come alive as if the myth or legend doesn't exist yet, mostly because she creates characters for whom the myth or legend is unknown. Burke and the Tiger of The Tiger's Wife are both characters in their own right, both dangerous and beloved by another character. They're both complex and real. So I asked Obreht if contextualizing myths or legends was a signature, to which she pretty much said yes. Someone else asked about the animals as a signature, and she agreed that was also true. Isolation seems to be a signature as well. She told us a bit about her next novel, which will take place on a desolate island, and will include an animal and a myth of some kind. So a pattern has emerged. I'll admit that I love the pattern, especially in her very capable hands, so I don't have a problem if her next novel uses many of the same techniques, because her themes have been complex and interesting anyway. In the time between the publication of The Tiger's Wife and Inland, Obreht admitted to having tried to write a few other books, just as she had before writing The Tiger's Wife. She stated that the work a writer does on the page doesn't change with the publication of the first novel. She also compared writing and those other attempts at a second novel as reps at a gym. I love this because I always felt writers put too much emphasis on publication as the sign of success versus the completed and well-done piece, which is difficult no matter how long a writer has been writing nor how many publications they have under their belt. Tying success to publication creates complacency in writers who've been published and sorrow in those who haven't. The biggest example of the latter being John Kennedy Toole. Courting publication is obviously part of the job, but coming and returning to the page is the bulk of the work. Overall, I loved Inland. It was so good that I had to go from a top 5 for 2019 to a top 6. It's beautifully written and manages to surprise the reader while still exploring present-day themes in the world of the Western novel. It's definitely one that I suggest, and I can't wait for Obrecht's next novel, but I'm willing to wait no wonder how long the third one takes her because her novels haven't disappointed yet. But what did you think of Inland? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? If you've read The Tiger's Wife, how in your opinion did it compare? How did it compare to other westerns? If you're from Arizona, did the setting feel real to you? Anything you wish I'd brought up? Let me know in the comments below, and please mark all spoilers. Would you like to see what I'm currently reading? Follow me on goodreads.com/AlexVolTrades to see what I'm reading right now and what book reviews you can expect in the future. I've made a Discord. I'm on it all the time and you're all invited to chat with me. There are channels for video games, movies, TV shows, books, and writing. Even a place for you to promote your own things. Join me there. Everyone is welcome. This has been the Sunday Book Circle, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share, subscribe, click that bell, leave a comment below, visit my blog at empatheticwriter.wordpress.com, and follow me on Patreon for exclusive content and a shout out on a video. Merch, 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 merch. Yeah. Check out my new shop at cafepress.com/AlexVolTrades for all kinds of products with my face on them.